You know what absolutely blows? Being a cog in the machine. Now, in this video, we detail the fallout of the mid and post-COVID studio gold rush, where AAA vets were being thrown cash only for investors to, in not that long, flinch, and entire studios have been going under. And that's sad news if you, like me, were excited by the idea of Mass Effect's director and its lead creative running two separate studios, both trying to make a science fiction RPG. That was very sad. Now, today is a bit of a different speed, but it's one that is actually still sparked by science fiction, in this case by Starfield, and one man who looked around him at Bethesda and thought, screw this, I cannot hack it anymore, and he went indie. And the big point is he is not the only one. This is a bit of a trend. The game industry is actually changing, and this time it doesn't actually look like the doomed gold rush that was inflicted by those dangerously alluring 0% interest COVID-era dump trucks full of money that of course just, turned out to betray everybody. I don't have one of those dump trucks of money, but thankfully, I've got today's sponsor. Who are the absolute best at what they do. They're boot.dev, and here's the deal with them, right? They'll teach you back-end web development using Python and Go, but more importantly, they're just a cut above the rest, and they're designed for you and me by people like us, because the founders are also gamers. They're actually viewers of our channels, that's why they hit us up. But basically, boot.dev is also a community RPG. And for something real neat, just take a look at this, which is the real-time leaderboard of other people doing lessons. They've got quests, XP, community boss battles, and all of that supporting an extremely thorough, detailed, and career-focused learning pathway that will take you right from the basics of learning Python through to full-on back-end development, and you'll be doing really fun side quests, things like remaking asteroids in Pygame, and you'll get vital job-adjacent skills, things like mastering Git that are extremely important. And of course, if you want to be a back-end dev, well, good choice. That's a really good career path. You're earning an average of 100 grand, great contracts, often flexible working, and of course, everything you'll learn here is proper-ass programming, transferable skills. And the deal with Boot is they just do it better than anyone else. So you can check them out at boot.dev/Bellular News. There, you get 25% off your first purchase. I'd usually go annual for the biggest saving because, well, if it's not for you, that's okay. They've got a no questions asked 30-day refund, and you can even browse their site, their materials, their demos, all that stuff for free. The big finding of this video is best started with a personal story. This is Nate Perkipile. Now, he left Bethesda Game Studios during the development of Starfield, and it's not like he was a small fry. He was a lead on that project, and recently he was the focus of this piece by Jason Schreier. And to be honest, he paints a picture that is my own personal hell. So he had this to say, quote, "I can pretty safely say there's not a single day I've ever contemplated going back." Another quote is this great one. "That scale of production is not necessarily enjoyable for a lot of people. You're very much a cog in the machine." Now, the reasons why he wouldn't want to go back is, well, because it seems soul-crushing. In his capacity as a lead dev working on Starfield, he had 20 meetings a week. Now, that is the sort of thing that, in a way, you might need to do to keep teams and teams of people, teams totaling multiple hundreds, aligned on a project. And frankly, when you look at Starfield from a content perspective, I think you can tell that too many people were making it. Now, for Nate, he says that this was nothing like his time working on Fallout 3 or Skyrim, and those were done with teams under 100 people. And there is a point there that's not the main one of this video, but I still need to mention it. Time and time again, we're seeing some smaller teams disrupt. And yeah, sure, there's outsourcing involved in all sides, and that absolutely holds for the big players, but here's just one example. Grinding Gear Games has got under 200 people. Diablo 4 was Blizzard's largest internal team at a point where we knew that World of Warcraft was like 550 to 600 people. Over 600 people. Now, it is true, there is less Path of Exile 2 than there is Diablo 4. Diablo 4 is really big because it was made by so many people, but what one do people seem to respect and enjoy more? I think there is something to be said for smaller teams, and if we were to return to Nate, to Oblivion, and the ones he worked on, like Fallout 3 and Skyrim, well, all of those games were peak Bethesda jank, because it's Bethesda, they're never not going to be that. But they came with a Bethesda character that I think, and seemingly in most people's opinion, Starfield kinda lacked. Now, Nate has decided to become an indie, a one-man band indie. He's using Unreal Engine 5, and he actually just released his first game. The game is called The Axis Unseen, and it's billed as a heavy metal horror. It's got a demo, it costs £19.99, and it has 180 reviews, with an overall score of 80% in Steam. Now, that is by no way a runaway hit. It will not be purchasing Nate Lambos, but that's actually why it is a good thing to talk about in today's video. Survivorship bias could make it look like you can just go indie, put together a few nice things from, common tools we'll get into soon, and just print money. That's absolutely not the case. The games industry is still extremely hard. I'm going to crunch some numbers based on my own experience and what's kind of seen as like common industry wisdoms. So it used to be that you would average like 50 sales, maybe 55 sales per Steam review. These days, the common wisdom is not as great. It's more like 35. Now, in this game's case, that would come out to 6,300 sales. Now, I'm just going to model this in USD, which, to be honest, is going to be optimistic. And looking at the pricing data, we can see that bar a 10% launch sale, there has not been a discount. So let's just assume 3/4 of sales were during the launch discount period, and that would put revenue at $145,629. It released October 22nd, 2024, which means that as of the time of me finalizing this video script, we have 47 days worth of sales. But of course, that is just top revenue. Steam refund rates tend to roll between 10% and 15%. Let's be nice and just take 10% of that revenue off, which brings us down to $131,066. But then there's Steam's 30% cut. That occurs after other chargebacks, refunds, etc. And that would bring Nate down from $131K to $91,746. Now, when working with a publisher, I was told that basically you can count on seeing 50% of the Steam top-line revenue number actually trickle through into what you will get. Now, by you, I don't mean literally you, the developer, I mean that your publisher gets, and then it will go through whatever deal you've got with your publisher. And of course, for Nate, that's pretty good because he's self-published. Now, here, even me just modeling a 10% refund rate is actually very optimistic, especially because this game is, well, an 80% user review, and it did have Unreal Engine 5 related issues on AMD cards because, yeah, it is current year, and there are sometimes AMD video card driver issues. I guess that'll just never not be true. And then, of course, Nate will have to deal with various different taxes and expenses. I'm not a US tax expert, or for his state specifically, but by this stage, I think you get the picture. Axis Unseen took 3 years to develop. It's largely a solo effort, but when you go through the credits, you do see soundtrack, localization, some art, animations, etc. were worked on by other people, all of which will have incurred cost. Suffice to say, if you were modeling an hourly rate across 3 years of 40-hour work weeks, it's not looking particularly amazing, although he does have one thing in his favor, and that is an epic mega grant, which will have helped with the funding of this game project. And it does make sense, because it's actually what takes us to the main topic of today's video. In this, it's Unreal, and looking through the interviews, it's clear that the likes of the Quixel Megascan assets were a humongous force multiplier for at least this one dev. Now, in a way, this does all seem kind of depressing, right? This is a positive to mixed launch from an experienced developer who got strong enough press because just his story inherently, and did do some of the indie festivals. But of course, it's only 47 days after. Nate has not done a deep enough discount to actually trigger the mass notification of wishlisters. That's how that works in Steam. Or any of the storefront visibility that you're going to get once you, take part in, say, the Steam Winter Sale. And taking a glance through the game's updates, it's pretty clear he's been responding to loads of feedback, which should mean that whenever it is time to hit the big sale button, there will be way more revenue. And that means a game like this can be an asset to his studio for 5, 10 years, maybe more. The point, though, is it's no overnight success, but I want you to take that in the context of the interview with Jason Schreier. He says he has not thought of going back. That's a sentiment that matters, and if you think about it, nobody's going to fire him for missing a revenue target. There are no investors that are going to rotate from the game sector into the AI sector and just leave you in the lurch. And going through the literature, one of the largest contributors to people's sense of burnout is a lack of perceived control over their circumstances. And I think the real cost of 20 meetings a week, which I'm sure for a lot of people is actually quite light, it's not in dollars, it's in the will to live. So, we have this one story, but there are so many more examples. So let's zoom out and tackle the industry and the sorts of game successes we can be seeing. Here's a pretty cool thing. 3 of 2024's top-rated games are small-scale indies, actually small-scale. They're Balatro, The Crimson Diamond, and Animal Well. I didn't say top-selling, I said top-rated. Another example is UFO 50 that's loved, another one is Vampire Survivors Ode to Castlevania. Each one is doing something that is distinct, and it's coming directly from the personal interest of the people behind those games. Rather shocking. And that channels the energy that the Larian founder Sven brought to the Game Awards, where he basically TLDR said, "The best games come from people who actually want to make them, not the executives and the marketing trends." He's absolutely right. And for a lot of these small-scale indies, we're very much seeing that. There's a lot to say about tooling in this video, but pure personal passion and the desire to make that specific game, that is the ultimate force multiplier. One of those ones that's just damn hard to hire for because, for these people, the game's theirs. And a perfect example is Manor Lords, a hit from earlier this year. It was in large part done by one man along with a band of freelancers and a publisher that backed the vision and didn't force the game out the door too early. And in every case with these games that I've mentioned, they were doing something different. Take with Manor Lords. We know that was him just wanting to make his personal dream city builder. And it's something he was able to do, down to one major change in our industry over the past number of years, and that is tooling. Both Axis Unseen and Manor Lords were made in Unreal Engine. Now, Unseen Axis was made using, full-fat AAA tools. Nate was using easily accessible virtual reality sculpting tools and ready-made terrain solutions, the sorts of things that, if you just look at the Unity store, you'll see loads of them. And a big Unreal Engine 5 feature came in clutch for him. It's called Nanite, and it was one of the more impressive things from the presentation that basically blew everybody's minds that unveiled UE5. With Nanite, he could import hyper-detailed models that maybe were intended or originally made for film or really for anything. He could put those models in, he could use those mega scan textures, and the engine would just handle it. Now, if you're not really coming from a game engine background or whatever, you may think, well, yeah, of course, you got your 3D model, you put it in the game, there it is, it's in the game, and there we go. That's not exactly how it works. In days gone by, there were whole stages of that pipeline where a lot of people were doing manual optimization work to get that kind of thing actually feasible in a game. Nanite's a major evolution because the engine just handles that itself, which is damn impressive. Now, we can also take Greg, the developer of Manor Lords. He started off using RPG Maker and then he moved to Unreal, and just like Nate, he was heavily crediting the availability of, example, free resources like Epic's Megascans. I don't know if they're free right now, but at least for a decent while there, Epic were just giving them all away for free. And to quote from Greg, talking about these things, he says, "These are the most crucial features of developers that don't get talked about much." So that's the main thing as consumers for us to know. Tools like this are actually enabling a level of solo or just extremely small indie development that in terms of visual fidelity, and that means in terms of actually game concepts even being possible, well, they can actually strike against the larger teams. That's especially important when we have an industry full of AAA veterans who at this stage may be pretty damn tired of AAA. Just take a look at a few of these visuals from Axis Unseen. That kind of thing was not possible, feasibly anyway, for a solo dev until this era. And the good thing is this new age of tooling is particularly well timed. I led this video with bad news, right? The various examples of AAA veteran-led studios have been struggling. I mean, Stormgate, it's one I really want to succeed, but they've struggled. Nightingale struggled. That studio saw substantial layoffs. They were an ex-BioWare studio, and 2 other ex-BioWare veteran studios basically just went under because the funding walked away. Now, those are, I think, to the last, expensive bets to leverage ex-AAA talent to wrestle some control away from the big incumbents. But the examples you've seen in today's video are different. They're focused, specific, financially efficient, and previously, only certain types of indie games could exist because of some things that were just inherent to tooling. Manor Lords is a perfect example. I have to assume Greg did not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars making custom assets and textures for absolutely everything. And that's the real superpower. You don't need to hire as many bespoke roles. You can literally get off-the-shelf systems that cover just about anything on Epic and Unity stores. And that means that the creative force behind a game can spend more of their time on the actual game bit, what will really make things fun for a player. And writ large, It's an interesting thing with how economies develop. At first, you need a hell of a lot of just raw manpower, but then you get more advanced tooling, you get more advanced workflows that increase productivity. But as companies grow, inefficiencies creep in. It's hard to keep talent density high in a company when you've got hundreds and hundreds of people. And suddenly the leads, who in the case of Nate, are the people that made your Fallout 3s and your Skyrims. Well, now, what are they doing? They're having over 20 meetings a week. Just think of the context switching penalty, the lack of focus, the impact on the number of deep work sessions that are even possible within a week. Suddenly, what got you to where you are has been watered down and assaulted by the structure of your company and the structure of your production. It's one of those things that's extremely hard to quantify, but I think it's actually one of the main reasons why a lot of big games these days are struggling to hit as hard as they should. I mean, a lot of people, they look at an Ubisoft game and they just start to feel the sludge. Well, some of that's always going to be the case. Those games are made by teams where 600, as was Star Wars Outlaws, is actually a small internal team. And so when we look at today's video, the subjects of this piece, they don't really prove that success is a guaranteed thing. Nate is not drowning in Lambos, but he's done a game. He can take what he's learned, move on to the next one, and for the next 5 to 10 years, well, whenever there's a Steam sale, he'll actually sell some copies and see some revenue from that. But of course, it does enable breakout hits like Manor Lords that previously we just couldn't really do in that way because of the technological limitations. So, don't know about you, but I don't want our best and brightest to be stuck with over 20 meetings a week. I would rather they make smaller games, ones that are more personally motivating, that actually let them cook. And so I put it to you. Do you have a game like that from a solo dev or a very small team that is just that energy encapsulated from this year? Let me know down in the comments. Of course, there's been plenty of news, a lot of goings on. Check out this video next.